Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. I see you coming in. Let me take a look. Amazing. Some familiar faces on there. Welcome, everybody. All right. We'll give just another second for a few more attendees to join, and then we're going to kick this thing off because next week is a big week, and we have you all set up with a really informative and entertaining question and answer session between Christina and Aaron for how are we going to navigate? This is the biggest show. Am I right? Do you feel like that way, Aaron and Christina, that this is the biggest
This
event
is a
show we're
big
going to
show.
do
Yeah,
this year? This is a big one and so long.
It's a
I
big
know.
show. It's a long one, and if if you look at ILTACON stats, there's some really interesting sort of ways to size this, including roughly 1,200 gallons of coffee were consumed last year. So
I might
it's
be
just me, so I can't
responsible.
speak for the rest of people. Yeah.
I'm going to be responsible for a good portion of that to keep it going. And I know the attendees probably are feeling the same way. At least they keep us caffeinated. We need that.
That's right. That's right.
All right, well, let's get ourselves officially and properly kicked off. I want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kalia Garrido, and I head up the strategic events and marketing at Hike 2. So, if you haven't heard of us already, Hike 2 is a fully functional, best in class innovation consultancy, and we specialize in digital transformation strategy, design, and implementations. Today, we have a great conversation lined up for you, and I'm so excited to introduce my panelists in just a second, but we're going to go through some housekeeping first. So, this is a webinar, so of course, your cameras and microphones are off, but ma'am, will we encourage you to connect with us? We would like to hear from you via the chat. If the Q&A is on, you can use that as well. And we'll also reserve some time at the end of the session for questions, should you want to just kind of chime in. We are, of course, recording today's session, and we will post this out on our YouTube channel. I'm sure Mitratech is going to be posting it out as well. And on our channels, we have a plethora of other legal innovation forward content. So I'll share some of those links here as we get ourselves going. Allow me to officially introduce my esteemed panelists today. I'll start with our special guest. We have Aaron Kotok joining us. Aaron is the Executive Director of Legal Industry Solutions at Mitratech, one of our proud partners. We are so excited to be doing this webinar in conjunction with our friends at Mitratech. And he also heads up the advanced law business. He leads and expands Advanced Law's law firm network while heading up Mitratech's overall law firms relationships and growth strategy. He has 20 years of experience as a lawyer, a consultant, an advisor, and a business leader. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. Thrilled to be here. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And then my esteemed colleague, Christina Natali. She is a former complex litigation attorney with extensive experience in high volume case management and multi district coordination. She's an expert in legal strategy, practice management, and law firm operations. And then here at Hike 2, she combines law, technology, and science to deliver innovative legal operations solutions. So, all of our attendees, you are in great hands. I am personally really excited for this conversation. So, Christina, please do take it away.
Thanks, Kelia. We're really excited too, and I'm certainly excited. I always love, as much as I sometimes think that lawyers, we can get in our own way sometimes, I'm really excited to have Aaron here too. I think that some of the best legal technologists, not even, I don't even mean to toot my horn, I do think that some of the best legal technologists really, I love that we both have legal backgrounds, practice backgrounds, operational backgrounds, and on the tech side, because I do really think, and that's the best segue into this webinar, is that ILTACON is such an interesting and massive conference. But really, I think of all the conferences, does the best job of really bringing all of that together. It really is a technology conference, but I find that I love the different tracks, sessions, that we kind of can go in a lot of different ways with it. Technology for practice, technology for operations, technology for support. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add to your back. I love that about ILTACON, and I'm excited for us to chat today.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Like you said, I mean, it's big. It's the last stats I saw were over 1,200 attendees, 240 some odd exhibiting vendors, 80 plus sessions. I mean, it's significant. And And I think it's good to have a conversation like this to be able to think ahead. How do you approach something like that that can be overwhelming at times and almost unnavigable? And I'm thrilled that we're able to chat about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good point too. I think about like when I was practicing law, we had our big conferences, like twice a year, a few times a year. And, you think about it's funny when I was practicing, we really didn't go to like tech, as a lawyer, we didn't really go to technology conferences or conferences that really were about tech at all. But at our conferences, there'd be an exhibit hall, vendor hall, mostly like service providers, and nobody went to the exhibit hall. Like that was just like, you might like maybe if somebody went like to be honest, we really didn't care about swag, which is funny. Like it wasn't good, which I can't wait to hear about that. All the swag at ILTACON. But we really didn't go to the exhibit hall because we were really not buyers, what have you. And this one is again, it's so different. Like I could not believe last year was my first ILTACON, and just the minute sessions would end, and sometimes even during it, but the minute they'd end, people would just like flock to the exhibit hall, and it's just a lively place, and people are having lunch there, which is cool, eating snacks, grabbing coffee, apparently a lot of it. So I think that's a really cool one about this one, and there's a lot people can get out of it, if we know what to do and where to go and how to use all of that time that we have there.
And I think that's the key point, right? This is an incredibly valuable opportunity. It involves a lot of time and money and effort that is being sacrificed to be there for a number of days. And I think this conversation is really about helping people think through how do you get full value from that experience. I can tell you there are like a couple of ways to not, and it's what I tend to see at ILTACON, which is the people who are sort of shuffling aimlessly through all the aisles and rows of the exhibit floor, doing their best to avoid eye contact from each of the exhibitors. The people who are sort of thinking, I'm going to learn everything I can about every vendor, and maybe after 2 or 3 days have gotten through, 3, 4, or 5 sort of exhibit tables or booths. There are better ways to think about what are the problems that I'm hoping to solve, who here can help me to solve them, and to be better prepared to make sure you're having the right conversations with the right people at the right time.
I think that is like the perfect structure for this conversation. So I like without reiterating it, or just completely re-saying what you said. I think that's it. It's the goal is number one, what does that mean in terms of outcome? Like what am I looking to get out of this? And then how do I put myself in the best position to come out of it with that and to apply it after the fact, not just take all of my notes or collect all of my swag and come back and be like, all right, another good ILTACON, like let's go home. So I know we had included in like some of the Hike 2 marketing materials for this, or pushes on LinkedIn, etc. We'd say, okay, we want to tie technology decisions back to strategic goals. How do we drive adoption back at the office? So coming back ready to go. And how can we really present what we've learned back to the stakeholders at our firms, like financial stakeholders or maybe general counsel, and know that we're articulating what we've learned in a way that says this is worthwhile. A, it's worthwhile that you sent me to this conference. That's number one. And B, it would be worthwhile for us to do X. This is a solution that I think we should do. So how do we prep for that? How do I go in knowing those are the outcomes that I want to take out of it? And so I think just like you just said, it's number one, what is the underlying challenge? So defining the problem that we're trying to solve. And I would add abstracted from technology, literally coming backwards, like forget about whatever technology you already have for a minute, forget about whatever, unless that is the problem, which we can talk a little bit about, and forget about like, okay, I know I need X, like what is the actual problem? So we'll talk a little bit about that. Who do I need to talk to? Where do I need to go? So planning, we'll talk a little bit about how to really go in with a plan. And that is for a type A where we love that. And then with that, what types of questions should I actually be asking that are high gain and leverageable that will A, get to the meat of what I need to learn, but B, kind of force, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Like we all know good vendors, bad vendors, good salespeople for vendors, good, et cetera, the good, bad, the ugly. But how do I know that I'm asking questions that will kind of weed out, pull out that kind of top layer, people who know what they're talking about. And maybe they don't, like, and I don't mean don't know what they're talking about, but there's something to be said about someone who's sitting at an exhibit booth at a conference who is a really good kind of spokesperson for their company, but may not be the none of us can do it all. And so there's nothing wrong with that person saying, you know what, that's a great question. And I know exactly the person I can put you in touch with at our company that can give you more information about that or talk to you about what your needs might be. So I think that's great. And with that, let's talk about defining the problem. Do you want to start there?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be the place to start. I mean, it is tempting, I think, to walk into ILTACON, into the exhibit hall, and pull out the map and start thinking, okay, which are the vendors that I want to be talking to? It's tempting even to do the advanced research and look at the sponsor lists or the agenda and say, okay, I think I figured out what are the conversations or what are the people and exhibitors that I need to have discussions with, but without the context of the underlying problem. Um, you're going to have no benefit of coming in as a blank slate. There's just going to be so much information. So I think Christina, you raised a really interesting point, which is like the underlying problem very rarely, sometimes certainly, but very rarely has to do with technology itself. It has to do with some process that is broken and some outcome that is suboptimal. So that's really the first question: is what is that process? Where is this process in the firm where something is not getting done, whether it's in the practice of law or it's in the operations of the management of the firm? Where are people frustrated? Where are people taking too much time? Where is there too much cost, time, risk, effort being expended on a process that's leading to an outcome that is, like I said, is suboptimal? So where is it? Who's touching it? Is it lawyers? Is it paralegals? Is it assistants? Is it other staff that are part of the firm? Is it clients? Is there something that is frustrating the clients because they can't reach you or can't reach a document or can't communicate with you properly? And
I
so
would
there,
also
yeah.
add in quickly there. I love that. Because in my brain, I always do like, is it IT? Is it ops? Is it lawyers? I love
Mhm.
even on the practice side, how many people that like we don't think about as separate personas. And I would add also that sometimes it's a problem that's affecting both. And it helps again for that going back and being able to explain the value proposition even is how do I frame this problem for both my practicing, right, my staff, my attorneys, et cetera, and then also how do I frame this problem as a business problem is really helpful.
That's exactly right. Right. It's what is the risk that we're trying to mitigate? What is the opportunity that we could potentially be either missing or we can take advantage of that we weren't even aware of? And then ultimately, what are the sizes of those? What's the size of the problem? And of course, related to that, what budget, what kind of ROI are you going to need to attach to the type of solution that you might be looking for? I think if you're not prepared coming into an event like ILTACON with answers to those basic questions about the problem, where it is, who's touching it, how big the risk or the opportunity is, and what are your resources to address it. I think you have a tremendous missed opportunity coming into ILTACON.
What are your resources to address it is such an interesting question too. And I hate that my brain does this about everything, but really it splits, right? Is do we mean human resources in terms of like who's going to own this? If who's going to own the problem, first of all, right? Who does own the problem? And who's going to own the solution? Who can we implement? Is it something that we have resources before we even select a solution? Do we have resources internally to implement it? Do we have resources internally to manage it? Train our teams? Like, are we going to be able to, what have you? And then again, budget, timing, all of that. It matters. And some of these, I don't think some of these are difficult, like systemic questions or organization wide things that are worth addressing. And so going into the conference without knowing, like, especially I saw last year at ILTACON, which I loved, I saw a few firms that, said definitely larger firms, but firms that would send maybe, yeah, like their head of innovation or head of, IT or what have you, but also I saw, that person came, but they are also enabling, like I saw project managers, I saw, implementers, like IT type people. I saw paralegals or practice paralegals, practice managers. And so I think that's great. And there's almost maybe also a conversation that can be had internally within the firm if there are multiple people attending from a firm, that really enabling, like, we've got our buyers, we've got our, administrators, we've got our users. Do I know when I go into the exhibit hall to talk to these people and ask these questions, like, do I have the support and resources that I need? Who else needs, who is a decision maker? Who's a relevant stakeholder? And should I be having some of those conversations ahead of time as well to know what I can expect to take out of this?
Right. That's right. And I think that then gets into sort of how do we then think about what is the advanced research that we should be conducting. I think it's so fascinating and so different in 2025 to have this conversation because it is literally completely different than it was a year ago. And
Wild.
the reason is obviously it's the generative AI tools that all of us with hope have approved versions from your organizations on your desktop, and you can actually go into them. Doing the advanced research so that you're prepared for the conversations and prepared to make sure you're talking to the right people is just a complete and utter game changer. I spent some time across the past few days just acting as if I was, working at a law firm and coming into ILTACON and kind of putting some of the problems or the kinds of categories into, in my case, I was using Gemini and I was using Copilot. Clearly, whether it's ChatGPT or some of the other tools that are out there, encourage you to like really spend some time focusing on, hey, so I'm going to bring this problem in. I'm going to say to Gemini, for example, I'm a litigation support manager. One of the bigger problems that we're facing is the following process. I'm headed, literally type it into Gemini. I am headed to ILTACON 2025. What are the vendors that are going to be there that would address this problem and arm me with some really interesting questions that I should ask? But also, what are some of the basic sort of comparative information among those organizations? At this point, you want to be focusing on facts, or at least claims that the various providers would have out there. What are their features? What are their specs? What's that public information that can help me get to a short list of providers that makes it easy for me to compare one provider to the next, so that when I'm actually in the room with them, I can ask sort of high gain, more leverageable questions and not doing the basic research there on the floor.
I really like that a lot. And I think that, there's two ways to look at it. I think, I'm always about like objective criteria and like being able, I like that you said, like comparing them against each other. I think there's something to be said. I think almost all of it is objective. However, I think it's really interesting and using the chat GPT or what have you to do kind of a show me the basic, functions, capabilities, claims, like you said, that they might make. Because in some ways, when we're making any sort of decisions as, whether it's in legal operations or whether I'm practicing and I need to know like what's the best solution for me or for my firm. Some of those objective criteria, like you're never going to have, almost never, I will say, like one like best in class solution and then like everything else is like just left in the weeds, left in the dust. Is you're going to have something that might fall, any solution is going to fall all over the map on some of the things, that some of the features, not everything is going to be maybe good at something, or even just the basic functionality, but I really need it to, and I know we'll talk more about that in a bit here, but like I really need it to integrate with my current tech stack, or I really need it to be a really simple user interface because a lot of, I just want it to be easy because like we don't have super technical users, something like that. Knowing what those are can help like tip the scale. So by again addressing what are those questions ahead of time and using, say, using AI or something to our advantage to really objectively look at like how we can compare those things will make it a lot easier to not only ingest and digest that information while we're there and afterwards, but help us in those fringe cases, or really narrowing it down. Like you said, there are so many vendors, and even if you narrowed your problem and the type of solution you were looking for, you could still go in and spend all day every day talking to all of the vendors that just do that. That's how much information and content there is there. And so I think knowing how to narrow to the things that matter to you is really a game changer and will not only help you come out with information that matters to you, but it'll help you use that time because like you said, like it could just be like you might get sucked in and like you could spend a whole day at one booth if you really were like I've narrowed it. And you don't want to do that because there's so many other great sessions and things to do there.
Yeah, and I will also submit, as excited as I am for ILTACON, as great as I think the ILTACON event is, there's a lot of information in the ILTACON website. But when it comes to the exhibit floor and the map and the vendors that are there, it's actually pretty incomplete. There's probably about half, maybe a little bit more than half of the 200 or some odd vendors have detailed descriptions of what they do, and a link to their public website. There are some high level category tags, but not all the ones are exact fits. And many of those vendors actually aren't even tagged by one of those. So relying simply on just the resources that we all have right now going into the ILTCON website is going to be limited. For example, when I played around with sort of various litigation support processes, whether it's e-discovery or case management or forensic technology, was able to identify something like 11 or 12 vendors that I thought would be potentially good fits for some of those processes. Was able to compare what their current AI capabilities are with each other. What is what are the top integration offerings that they bring to the market? Security and compliance, you get some, you don't have to ask, hey, are you SOC 2? Are you ISO certified? You can get all that information now, right? You can even get a little bit into sort of potentially what the vendor's pricing models may be. And even if they've got, or at least claim that they have experience working with a firm like yours. Are you, one of the top AmLaw, 20 to 50 in terms of size? Are you more mid-size? Are you full service or boutique? What kind of experience do those vendors already share in terms of their experience with clients like you? And you can really interrogate using a generative AI tool to get that information now, so you're better prepared to meet with the right people.
Those prep questions before we get to the like questions to ask while you're there, I think are so critical. And I know it would be really helpful, I think, to our attendees to share some of those questions. I think the biggest takeaway I have, even from when you just said them just now, I'm thinking about is again looking back to the sheer number of like decision makers or stakeholders that there might be when you get back. Like you might go in and be like, you guys, like I found this amazing solution, like we have to have this. They're going to have different criteria in mind or things that matter than you do as either practitioner or operational leader. And so having that information, even if it's just going into it, but certainly being able to ask questions that address them, may not make sense to you. You may not know what SOC 2 compliance is. You might not know certain of those things, like how things into, you may not know anything about APIs or what have you. But getting that in, knowing that that information will be relevant, it's certainly relevant to your IT team. It's certainly relevant to, like you said, what are the upfront costs? What are implementation costs? What are licensing costs? Something that we don't always think about. How many heads is that? If it's AI, like what do credits cost? These are questions that like I will tell you right now, like I never thought to even think I would never even think about, in my law practice or, and certainly not before I came to Hike 2. And again, it's that cross-functional collaboration that I think makes it work. And so even just having a vague idea of, I'm going to want to ask financial questions, I'm going to want to ask technical questions, even if you don't have the background to understand them. If it's a good vendor that can provide you that information, you can take it all back with you. You can ask them to send it to you in writing so that you can take it, forward it even to the people that will understand within your organization, I think is a huge game changer.
Yeah, yeah, and I think now you're armed with that, right? You're armed with that information. You're able to go into ILTACON and be able to think sort of strategically about how you're going to spend your time there. It's I'm still assuming there's a paper map. They may not actually
Yeah.
be a paper map of the exhibit floor, but whether it's virtually or in hard copy, making sure you're able to identify what are the vendors that you want to be speaking to, where literally are they going to be stationed over the course of the few days that you're there. Are they speaking at any sessions? it's a long agenda to look through, but you can kind of quickly go through the detailed agenda, and you can find out, are any of the people, any of the vendors that you're hoping to speak with, are they on a panel? Do they have a keynote presentation, or otherwise, that you want to make sure that you hear them provide sort of their insight to the market, or the other way around. As you're looking at the agenda, are you finding that there's, an hour with, gosh, there's really nothing that I want to sit in on. There's nothing terribly valuable. That is a great time to come back to the floor. I can tell you, as somebody who has worked the floor at various meetings and will be doing it for some period of time next week, we'd love when people come by when it's not, massive coffee break, right? That is the best time to visit a booth to get some really focused time with the representatives of the various providers. So feel free, go ahead, like reach out to some of these providers, schedule meetings ahead of time. I can tell you, we at Mitratech, we would love to be able to have a chance to know who we're going to be speaking with and when, and to be able to provide, some really sort of focused time and preparation in advance of that discussion. I know any other exhibitor would love to know that people are reaching out directly to them.
That's amazing. I will add, as we dive into some of the more specific questions, that
Yeah.
examples of things that our listeners can ask and be able to really leverage and get some value out of. Your point about checking the agenda to see if one of those vendors you're interested in is speaking, I think is actually huge. And I would certainly, if there's another session, like sometimes, I don't think always, I think they do a good job of splitting up the tracks to what people might be interested in. So you're not feeling like you have competing sessions. I will add as my like caveat that if there's competing sessions and like there's one that you think is super relevant, don't go to the one that the vendor is at, because you can still go to their booth and talk to them another time. But if
Great
you
point.
can find time, if there is a vendor that is speaking at a panel or session that you really want to see, I think that's actually amazing, because some of the best questions are specific to, what use cases have can you give me some example use cases, like specific, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Or can you tell me, like, how are your clients using this? Do you have any client references, things like that? In the sessions with vendors, again, another thing I love about ILTACON is you will not see really almost ever a panel that's like all vendors ever. And you certainly, most of the time, I think vendors tend to be like moderators, things like that. But it tends to be they're working together. It's a client, and they're literally going to tell you about a use case, or they're going to tell you about their success, or just where they're at. Like, we're just like testing this, we're piloting this, they're going to tell you what they're doing, where they're at. So not only will you get some of that really good information, but you could also maybe try to connect with those clients and really get like try to, hey, I'd love to talk to you sometime about how you're using this. Could you tell us how the implementation went? Like, use them as a reference directly. I think that's invaluable.
That is, we keep
I
discovering
know.
insights to what you want to say. So I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder, because I know you're going to switch in
No,
a
it's
second to
great.
some of those highly leverageable questions. But I think one of those, as you think about being on in person and being with the exhibitors and the vendors, and the difference between sort of that fact-based and claim-based research you're doing ahead of time. When you're in person, the opportunity there is to get to the more qualitative, strategic, cultural kind of
That's
fit
right.
kinds of conversations. And one of those, and I know that we recommend people think about it, asking is, hey, what are some of your key customers who look like us? I'm an AmLaw 50 to 100 firm. What other AmLaw 50 100 firms are you working with? Even better, are they here? Right? Who here is on site that's working with you that you can introduce me to, or that I can track down? What a great opportunity that I hadn't even thought of until you had talked about sort of the number of different customers that they might have on site at ILTACON.
Yeah, for sure. And again, my background in complex litigation, in high volume case management, I think about, like, you again, we'll just keep pinging back and forth and going off of each other here. But I think about, like, say I am at an AmLaw 50, AmLaw 100, AmLaw 200, whatever firm, even a mid-sized firm. We are rapidly expanding. Like, we're seeing so much expansion of law firms, what practice areas, and especially with again, with AI, things are changing a lot. And so some of that is really relevant, especially if I'm in practice support or practice, what have you. I might be thinking really specifically about my practice group, but in reality, these law firms have a lot of different practice areas. And so I think about use cases in two separate ways, but it matters when we're talking about these firms that have, more than one kind of concentrated practice area, which is almost all of the firms that are going to something like ILTACON. Um, is the use case something? So first question, right? Like, what is my specific business challenge that we talked about earlier? And being able to ask, like, literally point blank, have that question as a statement. Like, this is the problem I'm trying to address. My paralegals are spending too much time manually doing X. And then literally ask, how does your solution address this? Like, literally ask that question. And you might get a really vague, nonsense answer, and then like it's not, they don't get it. Or again, they might say, let's get you in touch with our, enablers, practice, whatever. That might be it, right? A use case might be that. The use case might be as something as simple as, eliminating manual, work entry, data entry. Or generate, the use case might be generating X type of document. Or it might be even more specific, let's say, and I'll play off of Aaron here, the Mitratech example. Let's say I come to talk about Case Cloud. I really want to look at some of my options for really like legal matter management, in the weeds practice type stuff. The use case might be that, but is it for a specific type of law? Is it for, again, are we trying to just do a little bit more of integrating our systems of record? Like, I just want, my timekeeping information to come into I just want my matter numbers in where I'm managing my clients. Or is it even more specific to like, actually, we're looking at matter management for our whole firm, and we want to know, is this pliable? Is it configurable in a way that will support multiple practices? So we might just have one use case now. We might be starting with one practice area. Is this something I'm going to be able to repurpose for other use cases without starting all over again or buying another solution? That's a really, I think, interesting one, and maybe moves into the integration conversation. But I don't know if you wanted to add anything there.
No, I think that's exactly right, and I think just to sort of bridge into what you just mentioned, and we all ask that question, right? Does your solution integrate with, and fill in the blank. I mean, it could be a document automation or creation, or document management system. It could be a client portal. It could be your Microsoft environment, or it could be other aspects of the firm's financial systems. I think one important thing is to not only get the answer, does it, but then also say, how does it, and can you show me? And I think for us, the people who are asking these questions at times when we're talking with the vendor, to figure out how important that integration actually is. I think sometimes we get a little too focused on like,
Yep.
let's go with the solution that integrates with the most. Well, how many of those integrations actually matter? How often are you going to use them? So I think there is a little bit of sort of a bilateral conversation that needs to happen there.
I think that's right. And I will add I'm all about providing specific examples, and I will anonymize as much as possible. And again, I'll tease, you all have a wonderful matter management solution that we do partner, we're partners with you. We work with all different solutions. We're very technology agnostic. I've seen clients that come to us after, they've selected a solution, after they've bought it, after they've implemented it. And then they're like, oh my God, our users are like, we have zero adoption. Like, this is a nightmare. We need to rebuild this whole thing. And one example I can think of was a matter management solution that, again, it is a more focused law firm that really does like one more specific type of law. But they literally said like, okay, we're selecting our matter management solution based on the fact that we need it to have the best integration capabilities. And not only have the other features and capabilities of that solution not been right and not been well implemented for their firm, but come to find out, yeah, it is capable of integrating with those things, but like that's actually the worst part. Their integrations are not working like the way that they need them to. But all what that was asked was, do you integrate? And not even necessarily the more specific. These are the two really important things we need to integrate with. Like I'm a law firm, I'm a litigation firm, and I need to keep track of, deadlines that are coming directly from courts, like court orders, court calendars. And like this is basically a complete waste of time if I cannot accurately, reliably, you know, in a great user experience, bring that data into this system.
Yeah.
And it can't. Like really genuinely, the solution does not work for what they need. But all they heard was, yes, we integrate. So again, even if you don't know in the weeds of any of this stuff, even if you don't know what some of these connections mean or how they work, I would really challenge you. I'd implore all of our attendees to use the resources you have, use AI or talk to the technologists at your firm and get some questions that even if you don't understand the answers, you can take that information back and someone who understands it can ask and like you said, interrogate for
Yeah.
the right information to your firm because yeah, maybe they do have really great integrations, but maybe not like you said for what you need, or maybe it's really not that important. You have no way of knowing that unless you can get that information.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this also gets to the fact that with any of the products we may be thinking about or the conversations we're having with vendors, ultimately we're getting down to something I always say when I'm advising clients who are looking to engage with outside counsel and helping law firms understand what that conversation looks like. At the end of the day, buying is always an emotional decision, right? And people buy things because they want some situation to be better. So getting when you're face to face with the vendor, asking questions about what does it look like after implementation? What are KPIs that customers are typically tracking after implementation? What results are they seeing? What surprises them? After they've implemented 6, 12, 24 months later, are there common problems or hiccups that they haven't anticipated? What does onboarding look like and feel like? How closely do we work together, or is this sort of a set it and forget it? Really helping to understand how will your or your lawyers or other aspects of firm management or otherwise, how will our lives change, ideally for the better, after switching to a new system? And what are some examples that look like what my firm looks like?
Yeah, I love that. And again, I think that's right. Going to some of our other questions, like, who are some of your competitors and how are you different? All of those questions go to, again, I'm sorry, like I'll be honest, right? Like we all, if in any role that has any component of it that's sales, of course we're selling something. But in reality, like a vendor that can only tell you that like they're amazing and everything is perfect and whatever, like I'm a little bit like skeptical. Like there's no way. Like there are going to be challenges. You can always talk about those in a positive way. I can say, yeah, I could give you let me give you 3 examples of like, and again, that's where those client references are really helpful. Customer references are helpful because no customer is ever going to be like, yeah, it was perfect and everything went off without a hitch. And so you can get some of that positive, but you should be able to explain, like, well, so one of the common problems we have is maybe that there wasn't, a really great, plan in place or like an understanding of what the use cases were. And so the discovery phase took longer than we expected. Or, what have you. Or maybe one of those things that we said it has to integrate with X, well, a year later, we've got a new CIO and they're actually, a Google shop instead of a Microsoft shop or whatever it is. And so now we've got to redo the whole thing. Those are challenges. And that's not saying anything negative about the product or, what have you. And so if you can't get that information, then like that's something to think about too.
Yeah, and ultimately an underrated area of inquiry at these conferences and the conversations we can have is about the company itself. it can be really democratizing in a good way to see so many different products and so many different vendors in one place, but it can also be really hard to understand who's really going to be around in 6 months. How strong is their history in the industry? Are they simply looking to get acquired, and we don't really know what's going to happen after acquisition?
Yeah.
So really getting underneath how long has this company been around? What does its growth look like? What other kinds of companies? What other kinds of industries is it working with? Is it just purpose built for legal and it's all the company knows? Does it work with a whole bunch of industries and therefore can bring a number of different kinds of learnings and different approaches to it? All of those I think are really helpful and the kinds of things that we should be capturing from these conversations that we're having with vendors.
Yeah, one last really good one you just again jogged my brain on is what's on the roadmap.
Mm,
So not even thinking like, yes, you part of your prep work should be what's on the roadmap for my firm. I think that's a great question to ask a vendor, like what is on your roadmap? What is already identified as like this is coming in the next 6 to 12 months? And like what do you think might be on the roadmap? What's coming after that? How are things changing? Especially again, because number one, it may be that something that you're really looking for that you're not seeing yet might be there. So it might be worth waiting. And then number two is back to use cases like, yeah, it's all fine and great. And like, we all think about like building out configuring something. But in reality, like, do you want to like build that technology for a vendor? And I don't mean that in like a negative way, but like if you have an amazing use case that like you're not seeing that's out there, like do you want to be A, kind of the quote test dummy? I don't mean that in a bad way, but B, sometimes that's amazing, right? Like we might build something really awesome and like game changing and industry leading, but like, do you want to pay as part of your implementation to build something that they might be planning to build for another firm, or because that's just the industry standard now? That's definitely something to consider as well.
yeah, yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that then gets to sort of what do we do next, right? We've
Yeah.
asked a lot of questions. We've prepared, we've circled the map, we've gone to the vendors we wanted to, in the sessions we wanted to. We've probably partied maybe a little bit too much. What do we do at the end? And I think just the same way you don't want to show up to ILTACON or something similar as a blank slate, you don't want to leave it kind of walking out the door and be like, that was great. I learned a lot. Um, my memory gets worse and worse every day. I know there's absolutely no way that if this was me sort of doing this kind of research and having these conversations after 4 full days potentially of doing sort of in-depth research, that if I don't have the processing time, if I don't have the opportunity to kind of capture key takeaways, that the real value is going to be lost. So I think it's really incumbent on people to spend a little time, if you can, each day, going back over your notes, maybe typing some things up, maybe logging or tagging sort of the various ways that you might type. I'm very much a hard copy writer. Lots of other people, I'm sure, are doing that, in their phones or on their tablets. But have a structured way to think about who are the top sort of vendor and product conversations. What are the top conversations that I had? Who are the people that I met? What were some of the key takeaways that I had about how it might be helpful to bring this or learn more about this product to bring to my firm? And ultimately, think about who are the audiences for your conversation when you get back to your desk. Is it like an executive summary for leadership at the firm, for your boss, or simply because you want to be able to justify coming back next year? Is it a high level sort of here's what I learned? And or are there more sort of detailed operational notes that you can go back to ops, you can go back to IT, you can go back to other teams within the firm and say, hey, it was really great. Frankly, I even spoke with some of the products we're currently using, and I learned some new tips, or I learned about the coming releases. It is, I think, for the vast majority of us, unless you have a photographic memory, it is impossible to capture and remember all this and relay it back if you don't really spend that time on the airplane, in the hotel at night, whatever the case may be, and make sure that you've got something sort of reduced in writing in one form or another that is shareable with other parts of the organization.
I love that. And I think going back to your kind of idea of ask feeding, a chat agent, what have you, your kind of here's the background, here's the context, here's my problem, here are the vendors, like where should I go and what are some questions should I ask? Leaving kind of that as like, keeping that as its own like chat window or what have you, like that becomes like, that's your persona. That's the information, the only information that chat can work off of. Keeping that open, maybe after each session, just like tidying up your notes a little bit, or after each meeting, what have you, and literally like feeding that in as either additional context or what have you. And basically feeding in as, now this is the information that we can update our prompt with. Now let's get this updated answers, updated comparisons based on what did I tell it about myself, about my firm? What did I tell it about these questions and these vendors? And now, like, how does that change kind of the summation, the valuation, what have you. And you just added in, I think, another really interesting layer, which is, who are the people I need to be talking to this about when I get back? Even give it like those basic personas of the people that you're going to be talking to about it, and feed it that information, and then say, what information what might I want to talk to this person about? What might they be interested in, and what are the answers to the questions that they might have? By keeping that in a thread and using it as like a, just updating that prompt with more information, or using those personas to say specifically, I need to talk to this stakeholder about this, could be a really good way. And again, more kind of, you can keep those notes on the fly, get your, your brain organized, and then feed it all back at once, and then you can get really great information out of that. That would be, I think, a really easy way to help you. That, again, there's going to be a lot of information, whether your memory is photographic or you take really awesome notes. Something that you can do with it, rather than just being like, all right, here's this massive, notes. How does it feed back into, how does it answer the questions that I came in prepared to answer?
Yeah, that's a great example. If you are going to start with pre-conference advanced research using some sort of generative AI tool, and coming back to it and say, hey, I just got back from ILTACON, here's what I learned, and giving some opportunity to validate through the tool is a great idea.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask, I wouldn't normally, but I'm gonna ask Kalia, because I'm trying to remember if we're like going the whole time, or if we should
Yeah. Well, I
wrap up and
mean,
get some questions from our attendees, if anyone has any. Is there anything in the chat?
no, there's nothing in the
Okay.
chat that didn't come from me, but this is
Yep.
definitely a good time for us to call for questions. If anybody has any specific questions, you can certainly let us know. You can raise your hand in the um, Zoom interface. You can use the webinar chat. You can use the Q&A. If anybody does have something that pops up, please let us know. But, in the meanwhile, I have to say this is a fantastic conversation, guys. I think this is really helpful. Like, I love, a lot of times in technology, we talk about, kind of dream state, or like all the things we can do. This was very practical. This was very useful for how it's actually, gonna, how the next week of our lives is gonna go, because it's gonna be a big one. So, um, a few calls to action that I have. I'm just going to reiterate some of the stuff that we put into the chat, and some of the stuff that Aaron and Christina shared with us, is that there is a really helpful exhibitor map that ILTACON puts out. The Mitratech and Hike2 booths are in the same kind of corner. So this is the cool corner, guys. Come visit us. Like, we would love to see you up there. So if you come into the show floor, and we can send all this out in a recap as well, but you come right into the main show floor, you head straight to the back, and a little bit to the right, the cafe, head towards the cafe, and we're kind of back over there.
We've got a
So,
question from Jay Young. I see
oh,
now there's Q&A. I thought it was chat. So
yep.
I'm happy we can kind of start there. Thank you for the question. It says, how much time is too much time to spend at a booth given the number of vendors to see? I think that's a really good question, especially because I'm going to do the lawyer thing and say it depends.
Oh,
um,
oh
but
boy.
yeah, and Aaron, please, by all means, I was going to start by just saying it really does depend. Yes, there's a lot of vendors to see, but again, I think that's part of it, is if you've narrowed it down to like things that are likely to be helpful to you. I don't think there is too much time if you're getting good information out of it and it feels like it's like, this is worthwhile. This is someone I'm really vetting as a potential solution, versus like if you're just wandering and getting, oh, let me see what this does. Yeah, there's probably too much time to just get like a quick, like, all right, what have you. Aaron, I don't know what.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add is for both yourself and for the vendors and for other people who are there, if you do anticipate that there is going to be a long period of time that you might be spending at a booth because you really want to learn, you want to see some demos, it's a great opportunity to say, hey, can we schedule some other time while we're here or even after the fact? That way you can get the most out of it and the most out of the rest of the time that you're there, and vice versa for the exhibitor.
I also, I think because we did so much just like feeding off of each other, I know that one of the things you had mentioned before we got on when we were prepping, and that I thought was a really good idea, which was almost like I've heard people talk about like time blocking, but
Mm,
like almost literally setting a schedule ahead of time. And so, one really good way to think about it is if you ahead of time are like, here are the windows that I really want to try to spend in the exhibit hall. If you have that down, and as long as you know that you have your questions and the people you want to talk to, you can kind of divide that time however it matters to you. So you might get a really long and intentional conversation with one vendor for that goes a bit longer than you might expect. But as long as it is toward that end and you're kind of like within your plan, this is how much time I have to spend in the exhibit hall, that I think it will keep you on track as like a good North Star.
great.
Great
Okay,
question.
Kalia, thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, we do see that the webinar chat is disabled. So if anybody does have any final questions, just use that raise hand feature or the Q&A. But in the meanwhile, we'll do a slow roll while people see if they have
Yeah.
any final questions. But we have a really nice
Oh,
takeaway that's prepared for you all. We're going to send it out as a thank you for you to for joining us at this webinar. It's kind of a cheat sheet that you can use when you're at the show, when you're on the exhibit hall floor. It's going to be the 5 key questions that you can sort of have in your back pocket that you can go and ask the different vendors. If you keep those kind of static 5 questions and ask them to each one of the vendors that you're trying to work through, it'll give you a nice picture at the end of kind of how they're all looking. So we're going to send this out to you as a thank you. It's going to come on an email. If you don't have it on hand, come see us. I'll be at the booth for Hike 2. We're in that kind of back over to the cafe section. I'm happy to have a few extra printouts for you if you need that. Come and say hi. And we're really excited to see so many of you at this event and at the other event. Yes, Christina.
we've got another great question
Another one.
Q&A
Let's
from
go.
Erin Barbie. We have a vendor that that's letting us beta test some software and it's not going so well. What's a PC way to address that if or when I encounter them at ILTACON? I think that's an amazing question. I think it's a really good question, and going back to some of the like, it's okay, like these vendors should be able to address negative questions, like that's just part of it. Not everything goes perfectly, what have you. If you'd like to address it with them specifically, if that's part of your plan, I don't mean that in a negative way, like that might be a good time if you have some time while you're there and it is something that is important to your firm. Maybe that's the challenge you're trying to address, that's the problem you've defined. There is nothing wrong with like while you're there face to face being like, hey, really glad to see you, and like, what have you, we're kind of having some challenges, I'd love it if you could put me in touch with someone that can handle this, or maybe you have some ideas. But if you want to just kind of, if it's like a just in case we see them, I don't think there's anything wrong with being like same kind of conversation, just hey, yeah, good to see you, we're still excited and we're whatever, but these are some of the challenges we're having. Like, again, you might get some answers, they may be able to address them for you, and or they know, it's kind of like they know you're there and that you're talking to other vendors, like it might be a good thing, they might get a little like jealous, scared, I'm kind of kidding, but they can see that there are other options, and they might even ask you like, hey, everything going all right, like, why are you like talking to what have you, and it's an opportunity to say these are the things that are not going well, and while we are testing this out, yeah, we'd be interested in if there's another solution that that can resolve or address those problems. Erin, I don't know if you had anything else there.
I would be even more specific to address, Aaron's question. Great name, by the way, Aaron. Appreciate it. Is reach out ahead of time. Hey, I see we're both gonna be at ILTACON. Would love to, sit down with you and provide some feedback or ask you some questions about our beta test. That's definitely a lot better
Love
than
that.
showing up at the booth and know if the
Okay.
person at the booth is a marketing team member who can't really get into
Yeah.
it. They can arrange for the right conversation, maybe a separate meeting room where you can sort of crack open some laptops and actually go through it and sort of see what the issues are, as opposed to kind of catching somebody off guard. It's a great opportunity to have that conversation in the context of the broader conference, because everybody is potentially going to be there. So I would encourage you, Aaron, to reach out to those folks in advance and see if you can get something scheduled. I'll also take a first stab. You're welcome, Aaron. I'll also take a first stab at Amy's question around skimming everyone during the opening and then going back. Absolutely. So first of all, I made the joke in the beginning about avoiding eye contact and being overwhelmed, but you're going to have multiple opportunities, whether it's the beginning or throughout, to walk through the convention floor. Make no commitments as you're walking through, for example, and just kind of get a sense of the lay of the land and who's where and who's got the best snacks and drinks and other swag. Ain't nothing wrong with that. That's a large part of why we're all there, and it's a great place, a great way to get the lay of the land and understand, who might I want to return to, or what are the ones that might be getting a little bit more attention that I hadn't yet necessarily heard of, that I hadn't done some of that advanced research on. So I think it's a great thing to do periodically over the course of those few days. I think you often find, especially in a multi-day event like this, that a quieter booth one day is a busier booth later. What's going on? Oh, they're actually doing a quick Q&A session, or they're demoing something. So feel free, as intentional as we're talking in this conversation, to also keep some of that time open-ended.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Again, there is a lot to see. The goal of this is to keep it from being overwhelming or feeling like you're not taking anything out of it. There is literally nothing wrong with, and sometimes that's the beauty of it, is you might be walking around and see something you've never heard of before that looks really interesting, or that seems to speak to the problem you're having that you didn't realize what might be a solution for it. So I think that's a great way to do it. And again, do like a swag run, or again, a lot of there's coffee and meals in there. So you can always go in during that time and just while you're walking through, see what catches your eye. And that's really a great thing to do too. All right, Kaylee, I'm back to you.
That's all we got, guys.
Oh,
Honestly, this
okay.
is super
I was
helpful
gonna
and great questions.
Is there any, I was gonna say, speaking of, walking through the vendor hall and seeing where things are at, I think Kalia can tell you all where Mitratech and Hike 2 will be. And I will be, I know that I am speaking on Tuesday. I think it's is it 10:30 to 12?
Yep, that's in
Tuesday
the
at
chat as well.
12.
10:30 to 12 Tuesday.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
my panel that I'm on is called Driving Profitability by Strengthening Attorney Support Team Dynamics. And I think, again, just one of those things where really the theme is, how do we identify challenges and find the right solutions, sometimes abstract from technology. So I encourage you all to join us there. And Kalia and Aaron, if you want to tell the fine folks where we'll be at ILTACON.
Yeah, for sure. I had shared the link of the exhibitor map,
Awesome.
so they can totally use that. We're in the back towards the cafe. We're looking forward to seeing everybody on site. I wish everybody safe travels getting to the show. Hopefully it's going to be a really productive and informative event for all of us. Aaron and Christina, guys, thank you. You nailed it. This was a great session. I personally feel, and I got to work the booth, and I feel like I'm more prepared to even just do that. So this was helpful on a number of levels.
I love it. Anyone on, feel free. I'm sure Kaylee has shared, but and there's another Q&A quick. So awesome. Oh, thank you all. Okay. I was like, let me see what it says. You're all welcome and thank you. And if anyone has any questions that they didn't ask in here, or while you're preparing over the next week that might pop up, please feel free to reach out to any of us by email. And we're happy to. And if you'd like to meet up while we're there, you know where to find us.
Yeah, please do. Hope to see you there. Safe travels, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.